There's hierarchies, social in freelance, in medicine, but it doesn't have to be as limiting as we often perceive.
As time goes on, people grow older, and people who have more experience become just kind of higher in the hierarchy because they have the skill and the experience and they follow them.
'Cause I felt like I was getting to the top of my field and I was looking up and there really weren't very many more rungs for where I wanted to go, which is why I went into freelance, and ultimately, that was the most satisfying path for me.
Today's topic is hierarchy demystified, liberating your authentic self. We're going to be talking a lot about personal growth and so a little bit of self-reflection, hopefully, about your own life experiences and how it can relate to your career identity. So, I wanted to start with just introducing ourselves. Myself and Ashley, we will be co-presenting today's topic. So I'll start with myself. I'm a marriage and family therapist in San Diego, California, and I have a private practice with my wife, Priscilla. So with Prospology, I am one of the mental health coaches or experts. I can support students in one-on-one and group sessions related to their personal growth in becoming a freelance medical writer. And we also talk a lot about the life stage transition and the career transition of becoming a freelancer or self-employed and how that affects your identity. And so we'll definitely be going into that today. Ashley, could you introduce yourself a little bit as well today?
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I too, with Prospology, am available for one-to-one. I really enjoy helping our students, kind of break into freelance writing and just can kind of give you a different perspective, especially, related to healthcare and kind of making this transition. I myself am an oncology nurse by trade. I did that for well over a decade, pediatric and adult oncology. And then I transitioned to healthcare content writing, medical writing, and consulting. So I've been doing that freelance full time for about 7 years now.
Great, thanks so much. And so now we would like to share a little bit about the company, Prospology, and what we do. Prospology was created by our founder, Sophie, who could not be here today, but she is with us all the time. And she's a great support and great leader for us. After discovering freelance medical writing and creating her own six-figure freelance business and also writing agency, Sophie has created this program to help more healthcare clinicians, academics, researchers, and scientists to create their own financial freedom and independence in their career as freelance medical writers. If you are interested in learning more, please visit our website, which is prospology.com. And you can also schedule a discovery call with Sophie to see if you would be a good fit for our program, the Thriving and Free Medical Writing Program. We have 3-month and 6-month versions of the curriculum to give you some runway to make that transition out of your past job or career to become self-employed. So part one, what are hierarchies? What and why do they work in society? I wanted to start with kind of a historical description of how this happened. It has to do with, yeah, there's some evolutionary basis for this. In ancient societies, hunter-gatherer societies, groups of people needed to organize in some way to stick together as a group, especially in nomadic societies where you're traveling all the time and not always in the same place. And it was all about survival. We know we needed food and water. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, a lot of life and the effort that we put in was focused on getting those needs met. And so if we want to do that more effectively, we don't want everyone trying to do it on them by themselves to leave the community into the forest or wherever to meet their own needs. There needed to be a way for people to cooperate, to work together and to achieve better results. And over time, people developed these hierarchies based on things like competence. So whoever was the best at hunting or farming or whatever it was, taking care of the kids, they started to become like a leader or a teacher for others. And so that kind of like leader and follower dynamic just kind of takes shape organically without any kind of like top down decision, like, in modern times, we have laws that tell us something about hierarchy or company policy, school policy. So a lot of these things kind of developed organically, and it was supposed to benefit everyone for survival. It would help for teaching the next generation as well. As time goes on, people grow older, and people who have more experience become just kind of higher in the hierarchy because they have the skill and the experience and they follow them. So there's a lot of trust involved in these kinds of communities in terms of how the hierarchy works. And yeah, the need for leadership. That's why we have these ideas about, elders and teachers um, to pass down knowledge and information and culture to the younger generation. And over the years, this has developed into, you know, communities developed into towns and cities, and then countries and nations. And so like this got kind of scaled up, especially in the last, I would say, 200 years. Um, these hierarchies have scaled up really fast. And now we also have things like businesses and corporations that have their own hierarchies in order to operate. Okay, I wanted to focus a little bit on the family aspect of hierarchies because when we're born and we're growing up, this is our first experience of hierarchies, especially because we live in a more kind of nuclear family oriented society now. And so a lot of your learning and socialization will come from just your immediate family, your parents, and then maybe, older siblings. We also have grandparents as well who are teaching your parents, hopefully, and then things get passed down. In terms of child development and kind of child socialization, we learn by doing and copying other people, and that's probably going to be our parents. This is even it even comes down to the most basic stuff like how to speak. Our parents are teaching us that we're observing them and learning how to communicate, and then we gradually learn these life skills like how to wash our hands, how to tie our shoes, how to eat properly at the table. So it's very direct, this kind of learning. The hierarchies help us understand our roles and they keep things predictable in a crisis. What I mean by that is over time, families and including extended families will develop certain roles with communication. Who makes the final decision? Traditionally, it would be the dad or the grandparents. It could also be based on people's strengths. So um, who is going to work more and make money, who is going to take care of the kids at home, even the stuff like who is a better driver, between your two parents, and that becomes like a role uh, kind of thing. And in a crisis in families, we have things like, when somebody passes away and the extended family comes together to solve this problem and work through this period together, these roles will just kind of naturally show up based on what people are good at. Um, and certain people will take charge naturally, hopefully because there's a lot of trust in that person and not because of dominating communication or something like that. And so you can kind of start to see the risks in these setups in terms of like power and control in families. So depending if you grew up in a positive or negative environment for that, you will kind of shape your view of yourself based on that. Like, am I a leader or a follower? Am I competent or not? Am I capable of learning and getting better? I mean, there are families who believe that people never change. And so there's almost like there's no point in teaching you more. Just like keep doing what you're doing. And I'm also going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm not going to learn either. So that's kind of an example of a more unhealthy message. So as we grow up and go through school, in our education, in our career, these dynamics and core beliefs will start to show up. And at the same time, in a larger context, we are also contending with other people's core beliefs and dynamics that have been passed down to them from their family and their background. Okay, Ashley, could you tell us a little bit about how these structures show up in school and the workplace, especially in terms of healthcare?
Yeah, I think, going to nursing school, that was my first kind of experience navigating all these different kinds of hierarchies. So myself, I started off at like a big state school, and that turned out to absolutely not be for me, and I could not navigate the hierarchies in that at all. Um, some of my classes I was in were like 500 students. So for me, that didn't really work. I ended up dropping out and then going to a small school that ended up being like 2 hours from, where I was originally going. And it was really interesting because it was an accelerated program, diploma based, but there were LVNs, so licensed vocational nurses, and RNs, registered nurses. So the RN program that I was in was 2 years, the LVN was 1 year. So you already have that hierarchy. Then on top of that, like, it's the academic hierarchy, like kind of, who's kind of running the class there. And then, of course, there's role and department based hierarchies. So I think when I got out of nursing school, um, there were even more hierarchies to navigate. Being a brand new nurse at 21 years old, I realized, there were not only academic levels. So there were RNs that, I had only gotten an associate's degree, but some had a bachelor's degree, but that didn't necessarily mean that they were more prepared hands on. Then there were levels of seniority, which dictates quite a bit in healthcare. Things like your schedules and, who works what shifts, who floats to a different unit. So being very green, I had zero seniority. And then, of course, role and department based. There's so many levels of, interdepartment roles that we work with, but there are hierarchies built into that. There were some nursing assistants the night shift that had been doing this job for 20 years. And here I am showing up, in my early 20s, and maybe our roles had a different hierarchy than was actually perceived, and kind of who knew the ropes better. So just kind of navigating all of that. And then, of course, there's the advanced degrees. So, having an RN versus an NP versus an MD. And there's just quite a few levels to really navigate in healthcare. They can be very helpful, but oftentimes they can be quite dysfunctional as well. So I think just recognizing that and realizing that it really can affect everything from staff morale all the way to patient outcomes. And it's not just within nursing or just for physicians or just for pharmacy. I think what Bernard and I are trying to let in this is, it's everywhere. So there's hierarchies, social, in freelance, in medicine, but it doesn't have to be as limiting as we often perceive, I think.
I also wanted to add a quick, additional reading as you were sharing, Ashley. It reminded me of an article from Forbes about task shifting in healthcare, especially during the pandemic. This is a concept that has slowly been gaining ground in terms of how we assign different work tasks and patient care tasks to the different license levels. If you work on a hospital floor, there's multiple levels of people there. It's a very oftentimes not equal. If you have a certain license, then you have to do certain things. What happened during the pandemic is that it kind of messed up all of these structures because of the kind of the emergency nature of what was going on. Like there were people being called to do certain tasks that technically maybe was not in their license, but because of maybe staffing issues, you just had to do it. And so it's not about competence. Like it's not because you don't know how to do it that they don't allow you to. It's because of the structure itself, if that makes sense. And as you go through the ladder basically, and that will be the next slide. You kind of start to fall deeper into those structures. If you're a practice owner as an MD, you are probably not doing phone calls to your patients. You have somebody to do that. You may even hire out a call center externally to do all of that scheduling for you, to tell patients their lab results. for myself in private practice with just me and my wife, we have to do all our own phone calls and emails right now. And currently, we prefer it that way because we like to be hands-on and we like to see all the results of what we are doing. But there are people who have group practices and they hire associates and supervisees, and you start to have, reception, scheduling, even automated systems are a way of doing task shifting. So here is the link for that. And the author critiques that concept in terms of the economic implications. He describes it as labor arbitrage, which is basically you pay people less to do even more work by passing down these, tasks that are supposedly, I don't know, non-essential or not, the top of your license. That's the other phrase that gets associated with this concept. So hopefully that article is interesting and thought-provoking for all of you. Hopefully there's no paywall. I think it's Forbes. Should be fine. Okay, let's go on and talk a bit more about kind of the workplace. We were kind of getting into this area already, but actually, if you wanted to elaborate in any way about this kind of climbing the ladder and how it gradually constrains you even more.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I first got into nursing and healthcare in general, the idea of climbing that ladder was really exciting to me and motivating. But as I kept going, I actually felt quite limited. So the higher I got on my clinical ladder, the more experience I got, the more seniority I had. Obtaining another degree, I eventually got my bachelor's as well. Um, I I felt a little bit more disheartened, which was interesting. And I think it's because in healthcare, various aspects of it, we're often told to maybe not so directly, but respect the hierarchy and know your role and stay in your lane. And I think that for those of us, who want to expand beyond traditional roles, it can feel very limiting and quite stifling when you're in that, because I felt like I was getting to the top of my field and I was looking up and there really weren't very many more rungs for where I wanted to go, which is why I, kind of made a sharp a sharp left, and went into freelance. And ultimately, that was the most satisfying path for me. I think, of course, it's different for everyone. Should you want to go into administration or other kind of roles, yeah, you can certainly add more rungs to your ladder. But for those of us that want kind of an alternative to that never-ending cycle there, this is definitely just a different option. Um, so I think, yeah, we talked about degree types, and I think it's so much more than that. There's a lot of respect for the hierarchy that has to come. Like as nurses, we're told like, oh, do not ever approach the attending physician. You should be going to the resident or the fellow, and I just kind of think like after having, 15 years experience as a nurse, we're all in healthcare and we're all there for the patient. So for me, like that, it just wasn't always working. I felt like the respect was kind of one-sided. And truly, we all have so much knowledge to share, which is why freelance is just, it's a beautiful space for us to kind of really buck that system a little bit of the hierarchy and instead be quite collaborative.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing more about that. And so now we will get to part two. How do we break out? And we're going to describe a little bit of the process of becoming a freelancer, becoming self-employed, and some of the new dynamics and challenges that you're going to encounter. Okay, the external transition. This is more like kind of logistical and maybe even financial, these decisions that we have to make to set ourselves up for success. Okay, Ashley, could you tell us a bit more about what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah. You know, just going into something being completely green again, I really struggled with. My ego already had kind of taken a hit from stepping away from bedside care. It was such a part of me, and I took a lot of pride in being an oncology nurse. Um, my reasons for going into freelance, which I think we'll get to, were a little bit different than just like a choice. But I think, you can really, you talked about self-criticism, and I think that's exactly what we can get into. Like, oh, why am I not good at this? Why, how can I be better? How can I get to the top of my game? And we often, want to go from 0 to 60 very quickly. And in reality, you just need to be gentle with yourself and kind to yourself and realize that you have the foundation and the basis for this. But just like anything, it takes time. And this is a completely different sector, being in freelance, just versus being at bedside. So I think a lot of us run into imposter syndrome very frequently. And I know we love talking about that at Prospology because it's so tangible and real for all of us. Um, and the question is, if you're ever asking, like, oh, do I know enough to be a subject matter expert? Do I know enough to be self-employed? Yes, you do. I mean, there's no question. If you've had a year of healthcare experience, it's given you plenty of knowledge to go forward.
I wanted to share a little bit about kind of what's been going on for me as well. So I just renewed my license for therapist this past week. So I've been doing this for 2 years, or working on my own for 2 years. The interesting thing, at least where I am in California, is that once you renew the first time, you can become a supervisor. You're eligible. You can take a 6 hour course, and then you can hire people. You can sign other people's clinical hours. And that's something that I've had to kind of adjust in my mindset. I got some feedback from people with this one idea that I have for our practice related to paid consulting. And someone told me that basically they tried to tell me that I'm not ready and that I should wait a bit longer, maybe 5 years instead of two, to start doing this because it's a lot of responsibility. I do agree that it's a lot of responsibility, but it's just that kind of criticism coming from others, and how you need to kind of keep that away. You don't internalize that to become your own self-criticism, because once you start telling it to yourself, it's easier to believe all that negativity. So you just have
Ultimately,
to
who's to say?
yeah.
Like if the client sees your background and thinks that you would be helpful for their consulting project, your background really fits the role, then I say leave it, leave it to the clients, leave it to those who want your expertise, because sometimes those in our immediate fields, like you said, that criticism and that critique, it can weigh heavier, I think, than others, and it's not always accurate.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And so I had to really kind of reflect on that. And I am still working on that project. I do feel more confident now that I have renewed. I did a bunch of CEUs this past week, and I finished all of that. So that felt pretty good. So now we're going to talk about the kind of internal transition. This would have to do with our mindset and our thoughts and feelings. The biggest thing that happens is you become self-directed, and you become kind of, earlier we were talking about that criticism voice. The opposite of that would be kind of the encouragement voice or the coaching voice. In our family background, we receive all these messages from our parents and other people in our life about what is good and bad, right and wrong behavior. Most of the time, they mean well, but a lot of it is kind of influenced by their own experiences of what worked for them. So as an independent person, you have to decide and figure out what actually works for you. A lot of times the self-criticism is, we hear it in our parents' voice, or even our teacher or our professor. There's these different people who kind of have this imprint on us. Existential personal responsibility. What I mean by this is, when you're on your own and making all these decisions, it really does fall on you. You do have a lot of responsibility for kind of what happens next, the outcomes, the money that you make that supports you, or even your family, other loved ones. There are no more crutches. When you're in a structure and in a hierarchy, there's always someone else that you can maybe attribute the results to. It's because my boss didn't give me clear enough instructions. It's because the person who I asked to do this thing like didn't do it right. It's because someone else messed up. And that kind of is a reference to our third poll question of, when things are not going well, where do you think it comes from? Is it myself? Is it other people? Is it the situation? Once you step into that territory where it's just yourself or even one business partner, you have to take a lot of responsibility mentally of all the choices that you're making and making sure that you're very clear about why you're doing it. Nobody's telling you to do it or else they're going to fire you. You're not going to like fire yourself in that situation. And so the best thing that you can do is to work on kind of trusting yourself um, with these ideas and decisions that you have in your mind. In terms of a quick kind of idea or suggestion for all of you to look into, in therapy, there's a concept called self-parenting, which basically means that you gradually replace that critical voice that came from your family or other people with kind of a more ideal voice of what a supportive and healthy parent would look like. If you did grow up with supportive and healthy parents, then you would try to emulate them, basically, or learn from other role models and positive figures in your life. It could even be, fictional characters from TV and movies and books who you connect with very much. You can kind of learn from them as a person and see kind of what they would do. In your religious and spiritual community, you might also have ideal role models for that spiritually, and you can kind of draw a little bit from that. Finally, your roles are more numerous and complex. You have to wear many, many different hats. You have to be your own marketing, your own networking, your own accounting department, legal department. Um, and of course, you have to actually do the work of like your job description that makes you the money. So your roles become less defined and more complicated. It's not just in your job. You have a certain job description based on what your license allows you to do legally. You can start to be more flexible about that. Like earlier, we referenced this. You can even start calling yourself an expert, which sounds weird. It can sound weird based on the stage that you're in with um, with your license. Okay, so in this section, we would like to share a little bit about uh, freelance medical writing specifically as it relates to the program that Prospology can offer. So Ashley and I will be kind of jumping in at different points. Here are some of the kind of core values that we have in the company and the kind of experience that we want to provide and facilitate for everyone. When you're enrolled in the program, you also have a community, an online community of current students and also grads as well who stay in the community. And it's a place for networking and sharing and supporting each other. There are a lot of people who have come before you and gone through these transitions and challenges. So you're definitely not alone. This is definitely not a brand new. It can be brand new for you, but we want you to know that there are people who have succeeded already, and we can be a source of support for you for that. So the first point, working for yourself, we kind of described that a little bit already. We have a more equal relationship with the client once you become a freelancer. Actually, what has been your experience with having a more equal relationship with others? You have started to do your own freelance work and consulting as well, where that kind of like boss supervision kind of dynamic in a hospital or in a clinic is no longer the case. So what was that like for you to gradually realize that, yes, I am equals with the client and I can change the way I communicate and present myself?
Yeah, I love even this little icon with the green check because that's exactly how it feels for me. I, have worked now with, very high-end big clients, physicians, scientists, biotech, and everyone that I work with, they very much value my insight. And I feel like there is this mutual respect and curiosity almost about how we can achieve collaboration and kind of the best project and output together, which is something that I won't say I never experienced at bedside. That would certainly not be true, but I experience it far more often in my role now. And I think, of course, too, as the years go by, 7 years in, it's a little bit easier for me to wrap my head around the fact, like, okay, yes, I am an oncology expert. People come to me for this type of consulting and medical writing. But at the time, when I first started, my my peers at bedside, I got a lot of varied feedback where they were like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no way that you could make enough income, or like, why you, kind of a thing. And I thought, I think I know that this is a good choice, and I think I know enough. And now I'm so glad that I did not listen to that aspect of it. And now, like I said, fast forward, a lot of my peers on social media and things like that that I've worked with in the past are like, I'm just so impressed by what you've been able to do. And that's great. That's a nice pat on the back for me, but I more so take it like, let this be proof that you can do it too. You could leave bedside tomorrow or decide to, add this as a side gig. We all have the experience, and it's just, I think, having the will and the courage to do it, and getting these equal relationships and these mutually beneficial relationships with clients. I find it incredibly satisfying.
Thank you. And I wanted to share a quick example that's going to happen today for myself. Later today in the afternoon, I'm going to be taping a podcast. And the host is an MD, and he has achieved financial independence in his life and through his career. And we connected on it's a website called podmatch.com where hosts and shows and guests can connect to try and facilitate, new episodes and new connections. That's where we connected. And leading up to today, I was really trying to process my own feelings of like, I'm going to be talking to an MD. I only have a master's degree, not even in necessarily, people have these debates about whether psychology is a real science and all of that. I just kind of stopped thinking about that. But recently, those thoughts kind of started to come up again, and kind of questioning myself, like, what could I share or contribute to someone's show where they have made way more money than me. They have a lot more experience, especially in the business world. I'm only 2 years old in our business, and I'm still learning a lot. Um, and trying to work through those feelings of like, why am I feeling this way? He was the one who reached out to me, so it can't be. That's not really what he's thinking about me. It has to be coming from somewhere else. It could be these peers who we've talked about who give us this feedback of like, why are you the one who can do this thing and be different? Or
And
even family members. Yes, Ashley.
yeah, no, I was just gonna say, this is why I really love that you share so much, of your personal journey in business, because I think it's quite ironic that I'm hearing you keep saying the word only. I only have a master's
Hmm.
degree. I only have 2 years in business, because it just goes to show all of us, I think, that we all really do have this self-limiting kind of little mindset that lives in the back, where it says like, you only have this, maybe you're not good enough, maybe this isn't enough experience or whatever. um, and it just goes to show that we all struggle with that, but I think it's very often not accurate.
Hmm.
Like, I look at your experience, Bernard, and I'm very impressed, and you have so much to say and so much to help. And as an expert for Prospology, you bring so much value. So I think, like, there's no question. But on the flip side of that, when Sophie and I first met, we met at an imposter syndrome roundtable. And I said to her, I struggle because I don't have a master's degree, or, I don't have this, I don't have that. And she was like, that's so interesting. I would think that they would want to hire a nurse way more than they would want to hire, somebody with a PhD. And so it goes to show it really is just false perception.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And so that's going to be an hour or so from now. So, wish me luck for that. Um, Finally, we have the freedom focused lifestyle. So this would be kind of a little bit logistical, but also mindset related. Once you become a freelancer and self-employed, you can set up your schedule in any way that you want, as long as you can still get all the work done and do everything you're supposed to. And this is something that I think a lot of healthcare clinicians and providers um, kind of get this whole new experience of like, I can set my own schedule, and I also don't have to work 10 or 12 hours in a row anymore. And it's something that it can be very jarring. And people will describe early on feeling stuck of like, I don't know what to do with my time. I have all this free time, and I kind of lost the ability to enjoy life. People talk about this while going through med school and residency or going through the tenure track that like they lost a lot of things in their life and they thought that they could never get it back. They became convinced that this is what I need to sacrifice to have success or to have money. People delay their relationships, they delay marriage and kids for this thing that gets told to us like should matter more than that. So once you become independent, you realize that you can get back to the things that actually matter to you. We have a lot of students come through Prospology who are parents, whether that's single parent or they are in a relationship. But that's one of the top motivators when people come to us and they say, I want more time with my kids. Like I don't want kind of what happened with myself. Maybe my parents were super busy working, and so everything becomes wide open, not just in the business world and how much you can make and what you can do, but also what you can do with your personal life, your friends and family and loved ones. Okay, so uh, finally we have Ashley sharing a little bit more about her story, and she has kind of touched on it here and there, but this is a place for you to share and elaborate more on any points that you feel like would be interesting or helpful for us to understand what it's been like for you.
Yeah. So I did touch a lot about kind of the beginning of my journey. Like I said, I did come out with a diploma and a associate's degree. I condensed everything into 2 years. I really needed to just get out and support myself. So I worked nights for many years, and at that time, I went back to get my bachelor's degree. I'm very glad that I did that. And then I just really kept like seeking new experiences, and I think that this is what I was talking about, the rungs on the ladder. I would master a skill or a role, work my way up to charge nurse very quickly, or doing certain specialty kind of chemo procedures and things like that. And then I felt like I mastered it and I wasn't satisfied anymore because it felt very redundant and repetitive. Um, I was, I think, gosh, 12 years into my career, um, very experienced in all areas of oncology. And this whole time, I was struggling with chronic illness. So I have a primary immune deficiency, which is trying in the healthcare field because I get sick very often. I don't have the same protective mechanisms that everybody else does. And then on top of that, I have autoimmune disease, which was progressing very quickly in my late 20s and then my early 30s. So in that time, I had gone out on disability and basically I had gone from full time to part time to per diem. I was married at the time, and I still could not keep up. Like 12-hour shifts were too long, 10-hour shifts were too long, and I was really sacrificing my own physical and mental health to stay in a role because my ego couldn't handle letting go of it. So once I took some time to heal physically and a little bit mentally as well, I started looking for different avenues of what I could still use my nursing degree and my knowledge in, um, just not bedside. And I came across freelance writing. I started as a journalist for the first few years, built up my portfolio. And then very quickly, I started just kind of getting bigger clients for more high science writing, higher paying pieces. And then I would say about 4 years in, I started doing a lot of consulting, and that's primarily what I like to do now. But I always say like my hand was kind of forced into freelance medical writing. But now looking back, it's bittersweet. I'm happy that this is where I ended up. I'm far more healthier and happier in my line of work now. I've achieved a much better balance.
Yes, and the flip side of that would have been to feel like we are forced to continue making those sacrifices that you were saying, sacrificing your health or your time to stay in that um, structure. And so that's one of the kinds of emotional freedom that people find through freelancing is that I don't have to make those kinds of sacrifices anymore that everyone else is doing. I don't have to be impacted by this career path or educational path in the same way that I did in the past. So that's a big kind of takeaway. And we, as we go through these different years, we get a stronger appreciation of like how gratifying that is, and we can feel a lot of gratitude for that.
Yeah, so I think, I mentioned this too, being green all over again in the same but different kind of role, was interesting, but I really enjoyed that challenge. And I love mastering a new skill. I love learning new things, and I love teaching. So, when I was a bedside nurse, I loved teaching my peers, patients, caregivers, and now I get to do a lot of education for providers as well. So, in taking on these new challenges, it helps me learn and grow, but I also feel like it helps others in the healthcare space learn and grow and, you know, deliver great patient care, well researched information that's getting back to them. I just kind of feel like my reach and my passion for medical education just kind of got way bigger. I would like to think that I'm still very much helping um, patients and providers just on a different scale. So, and I think if you find change stimulating too, I wrote like become a medical writer because it is just so satisfying. I think it definitely, being self-employed comes with its challenges as well. Um, but we talked about a freedom-focused lifestyle, and Prospology, obviously, we're so big on that. And I think if you look, even at um, Sophie, our founder, and my social media, it's really important, especially when you're working for yourself, to not go so far in the other direction, where you're working now 20 hours a day nonstop. You're not taking care of yourself. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You're taking on too many clients. There's a difference between being motivated and growing your business. And then eventually, I think finding that nice balance. So, I brought up mine and Sophie's social media, and being into this so many years now, I think we have both learned that it's okay once in a while to, you know, take a little bit of time off and maybe, go to an exercise class or go get a pedicure in the middle of the day, if I don't have any appointments. And it's stuff like that that just kind of, it really keeps you going. And I think you'll see as you continue in your freelance journey, it will give you more longevity in the industry. So I mean, how do you feel about that, Bernard?
I think it's true. You start to realize like how much more that you can do. And because you don't have these different things putting pressure on you, you can last longer in your career. You don't have to retire at like the regular time as everybody else. Especially as you gradually move into if you move into the kind of like consulting and almost like leadership types of roles, where people come to you and they need help from you and they want to learn from you, that's something you can do basically as long as you are able to speak and talk, physically. And that's a really cool feeling that like you aren't limited um, anymore. And it isn't necessarily like this in healthcare, but even there are some types of careers that have um, mandatory retirement ages because of the nature. I think the one I'm thinking about is air traffic controllers. I think you're forced to retire because of the way that it's so intensive, and they want to prevent you from, I don't know, something like that. I've heard of that as an example, but you don't have to limit yourself to that anymore. Or in other areas in a corporate world, people retire like once all their stuff, like once all of their benefits like vest, for example, like that's when you retire. I wanted to say also that the COVID pandemic kind of redefined what the limits are for everybody, where you're not necessarily going to retire at 65 anymore, at least in the US. You can retire or adjust, become part-time. depending on what you need, and it forced people to reevaluate what they really need in their life. Like, do I really need to be working this much, or even making this much, especially if I can move to a different state or a different country to save money? And so people went through all these adjustments and transitions at the same time. So hopefully, things are more settled now, and people can continue to think ahead for kind of what is actually good and meaningful for them. So we're at our close for today. We just wanted to check in if anyone has questions, how or even just how you're feeling about hearing from us today. If you have any ideas for what you want to try out or what you want to work on for yourself after today. And as the questions come in, I had one for Ashley as well. I'm wondering if you could share one thing for us that you're looking forward to in the next year, 2024. What are you uh, looking forward to work on or to achieve because of being self-employed and having that independence?
Yeah. It's been a really tough year for me, personally, and also just in business. I have found that just, finding and retaining freelance clients, I've really struggled with this year, and that's due to a number of different things. Um, Budget, being post-COVID, maybe even myself, I can frequently get in my own way sometimes. But I think one thing I am super excited about, and this has been like a dream of mine, is that I will start with Prospology, teaching college in the fall. So that was always something that I really wanted to get in front of other healthcare students, nurses, pharmacists, um, and just kind of let them know about this beautiful idea that is freelance medical writing. And I had never heard of it when I was in school. I didn't think it was an option. Um, and, now fast forward, I wanted to try and break into that, but not having a master's degree, I was running into quite a few roadblocks. And now, at Prospology, we've kind of all partnered up, and quite a few, if not all of our experts, I believe we're going to be kind of teaching a course together. So that's something I am really quite excited about. And I feel like it's a really nice milestone in my personal career that I'm excited to kind of put that pin in there and see where that takes me. How about you, Bernard?
Yeah, I just forgot that I'm actually part of that project as well.
You are.
I am also going to be teaching that university course, and that is something that, in my world, in my profession, people say things like, yeah, you need to have a PhD or a PsyD to teach. You need to be licensed for a certain number of years, and so that kind of pushed me away from that teaching route, even though I've gotten a lot of encouragement from people that I should try it out. I think for me, what's next in the next year is also, the supervision and consulting aspect that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to start looking for those opportunities, and it will help me practice kind of being more confident in myself to just tell people that, yes, I can do this. I'm excited to do that. Instead of just thinking that I'm not qualified yet. Like, not if you keep telling yourself not yet, like it's never gonna happen. So at some point you have to accept that like there's never a perfect time. It's just based on how ready you feel emotionally, and it's not about the external situation, your license, your career situation. So we wanted to share a couple ways that you can keep in touch with us. Ashley and I are both on LinkedIn, and our founder Sophie is as well. She posts a lot of great content as well. Feel free to add and connect with us there. You can also stay tuned for upcoming webinars. We do one about every month or so, and it's free every time. Sophie also writes a weekly newsletter that goes out on Sundays, and it's kind of a lot of sharing about how she's been doing in the company, new exciting updates, and also a lot of stories and sharing from current and past students to hopefully encourage all of us that, yes, you can do it too. You're not alone in this freelancing world, and it's better and it leads to more success when we all support each other. Sophie also has a newsletter that is primarily on LinkedIn as well, Freedom Focused Entrepreneurs, where she just talks about entrepreneurship in general, not necessarily about medical writing every time. And it's been very interesting and helpful to see kind of her insights. And she is around people all the time. She has her own, mentors and people who she learns from, and she kind of brings those ideas back to share with all of us. And so I just wanted to say thank you all for coming today. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you can learn something and think about something for yourself and to stimulate some reflection about your own life, including the stuff about, your family background and how that has impacted you. So yeah, thank you all again. And please stay tuned in the future, through our website and through the newsletters for more webinars. And if you are interested in a career in medical writing and our Thriving and Free medical writing course, feel free to check it out on prospology.com and book a discovery call with our founder, Sophie. Thank you all again. Have a good rest of your week.